One of the issues that gets contested in Seattle by ignoring me is the allegation that Donald Trump and Aaron Dixon have been working for the same team all along. Most of the people in Seattle see that as being false and that it is common sense to regard that as false. The subtext of their explanation for the eerie and criminal situation that engulfed me when I got here many years ago is that Yoko Ono is friends with both of them and she hates me, so they just have a mutual aversion for me. Well, even if you are foolish enough to completely ignore all of the evidence I have brought forward about the Green Party, their instigation of 911, for example. Sean Strub was outside the Dakota the night that John Lennon used the double, a plan that was prior run in rehearsal with this fabled story that Paul was dead. Even if you're foolish enough to dismiss all of that evidence, which is in my blog, storychecksout.org, there's still another explanation that you need to be made aware of because it's a talking point that doesn't depend upon admitting what Yoko Ono is, and it doesn't depend on admitting what is in my blog. It's much simpler than that. What these two people have done, these two movements, social movements, have done together. Donald Trump looks at somebody who's been destroyed by criminal activity and says, well, you've had a big adventure. And Aaron Dixon looks at somebody who's been destroyed by crime and says, well, it's no different than the people I represent who were destroyed by crime. And together, what both of them have done, have argued successfully that the United States of America is not a nation of laws at all. It's a nation of crime. And they want to take control of the crime and use it for their statecraft ends. And in proposing this argument together, they have united and taken just about everyone with them. And as a consequence of that, it's possible to draw the attention with hard work of all sorts of leads of abominable crimes to the FBI, to Homeland Security, to politicians, to the Navy, to friends, to ex girlfriends, to the police, and have it all waved away. Nobody follows any of it, nobody bothers with any of it because of these two encampments who have created a unity in the idea that we're a nation of crimes, not a nation of laws. And the University of Pittsburgh was always very practical about it. They laughed up their sleeves at me, ha 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 ha. That's what you get for telling the truth, queer ball. And they called this the nature of reality. And there, until the Fernhollow Bridge collapsed, I had no comeback for any of it because they were getting away with and have continued to get away with terrible character assassination and life destroying activities. I was gratified to see someone I've admired from a distance in Pittsburgh walking safely through the streets of Seattle today, looking really well preserved. I, the days when people mistook my age are long ago. I've been subject to grueling antagonism. I don't take it out on anybody. I was happy to see how well preserved a much older person is than me, who I've admired from a distance many, many, many years. Well, when you look at the problems that I have had in coping with the unprovoked, insidious, and downright evil, terrifying domestic terrorism of Peter Sinfield, who negotiates the lobby of Aaron Dixon and Donald Trump for Yoko Ono. They've used two reasons from the Broadway musical Hair, whose partner is the attorney for the cast of that Broadway musical, for dismissing me. One of them is that I was notoriously needy when it came to my partners. I was deaf. And although they lied about this in Pittsburgh, I suffered physically much, much, much more severe internal pain from a neuroplasm they had implanted, making me much more conspicuously needy than they would ever admit. It's just one of the very terrible crimes. Of course, they subdue that by saying other people have suffered more than you. And that takes a lot of suffering to suffer more than that thing has caused me. So the other is that I didn't take the drugs that caused that injury voluntarily. They were forced on me, and all of that is taboo to the Broadway musical Hair. I talked to people who were right wingers who own hardware stores, and I said, "Would you give a child paint thinner, even if he was begging you to breathe?" And he said, "Never. Not even if he was on his knees pleading with me, please give me some paint thinner to breathe." These people kidnapped me, stole paint thinner, forced me to breathe it while I had ingested a horrifying super microdot after beating my brains in and telling me to obey them. It was the only escape I had. And these murderers not only got away with doing this, but when they doubled back for their script, I was forced by the Ouspensky Circle to pay for the gas that they gassed me with. In other words, they expected reparations and special compensation for torturing me. And this really happened. Yoko Ono was negotiating with Trump and Aaron Dixon. And the lead player was named John Schulman, who's come to the attention of the people who he was stealing books for. Now that's strange. That may sound strange, but that's the truth. The FBI was sucking up his thieving, and they were shocked to discover they were sucking up his thieves. Well, there's a group in Europe these days called Arctos, who are fascists, and they believe in the occult. And in Pittsburgh, the gang that put this all together had a band called Arcturus, who's chummy with Ringo Starr and King Crimson and Peter Gabriel in ways that I was just the object of derision that they sold to these people to make their ends. Well, the name of the band is Arcturus, similar enough to Arctos. They begin to describing the similarity of cause and character. Again, in their occult, we find evidence of the Ouspensky Circle, which I've said in my last video, is an oligarch leaping frog council that goes behind the scenes of all of the nation states and civil media who are willing to manufacture consent together for the ruling class that hit us with AIDS and COVID. Now, on the subject of business and crime, almost all Americans are liars, no matter their ethical stand. They argue discreetly and obscurely how best to lie and how best to frame the double exposures. This is without exception. The black lobby is full of these discreet, obscure double exposures, arguing that their claims are ethical. I picked up a book today from 1968 called Rights in Conflict. The introduction was written by Matt Schreickel. The book was written by David Walker. And Max Frankel explains it was rushed into print because they wanted to get it out, as it turns out, the week before the White Album was released in November of 1968. The last line, talking about the impulse to violence in our society, uses the term throbber before it bursts, throbber. And he talks about, a future um, accounting. I don't remember the exact language he used or what, but what he was saying was revealing. They knew, these people, that the plan was to license sex and then release a virus so that the sexual revolution self-destructed and say ha 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 and put together this Green Party collection service demanding reparations, payment to the people who burn you alive and so forth. And the insanity of this kind of crime goes back to the idea that um, the nature of reality is at work. What that means is that the idea of ethics, the idea that we're a nation of laws, is a false hope, and that perfidy is the nature of man. So you should get used to it. And people would rather not be told the truth. That's why Dan Rather was used in Dealey Plaza. He made his name off of that case. Now, he lied about what he saw in the Zapruder film, but it was a phenomenological statement that people would rather not be told the truth. And that's what Amy Globalzar means when she says she knows you. Now, Oliver Stone, when he talked about Ernest Hemingway, talked about the old man of the sea and compared Jim Garrison's case to the old man of the sea, the man who comes home with just the barest bones of the trophy. Well, as everybody knows, they stripped me of everything that they possibly could, and somehow I still managed to arrive with the necessary and sufficient evidence of what they had pulled. Now, I was told by Dina Michaels, who went to Harvard, I met her at the governor's school, that basically religions depend on people who are suffering. And that without people suffering, religion would be calamitized economically, morally, financially, in terms of their support. I believe that explains why very rarely did anybody address the problem that many people conceptualize as overpopulation. You see, there were things we could have done. The Post Gazette in the 70s ran one letter about it, where they called the one-child policy of China draconian. Arnold Katz considered it perfectly sensible to have only one child. He explained to me one night his seemingly marvelous daughter was his only child. He focused on raising her and rode a bicycle as much as he could because of these problems. But we didn't address it that way. We didn't talk about stabilizing a population. We didn't talk about the fact that a lower infant mortality actually stabilizes population by enhancing the eradication of poverty. The more poor people are, the less likely they are to have successful pregnancies, and so they aim for more as a form of insurance. So there were a lot of things we could have done, but instead, what they aimed for was a media control tower where tokens would be represented, which is what the Wilsmensky Circle is pulling with all of this stuff about the Green Party, plague mass, the war in the Ukraine, and so forth. And the danger that comes from is implicit in believing any single word that comes out of the mouth of anybody from UW Dialectical or the University of Pittsburgh, even for a second. Due to what John Stockwell, who used to follow me, said. He said, what I learned was the most terrible thing you could do to somebody when you tortured them was give them the idea that you were human, that there was something they could say that would change you, because all of these sadists are lying through the teeth, and there's grave, grave dangers in believing them even for a second. To stop it from happening, you're told to act normal. This is something I learned when I was a child and being kidnapped over and over again. The outcome of which is obvious. When you behave like it's normal, you can see from Pittsburgh's ossified position about what they did, what happens when you say they're being tortured. Oh, no, no, nothing happened because you don't want to be killed. Now, people wonder maybe what makes me go on. Do I expect to reach somebody? Ha 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 ha. Do I think that these people are human and not lying through the teeth? Absolutely not. Do I want to try to help somebody reach somebody? Maybe. Do I hope someday to get civil remedy or a lawsuit together? Certainly. Protection from abuse, that's why I came here in the first place. God said they would protect me from abuse. What's the difference then with going along with an evil system, the way Mephisto is depicted, Gustav Grundgrens is depicted in the film Mephisto? Aren't you just playing along with this kind of society? I hate to remind you that there's a difference between journalism in a framework like that and playing along and being Mephisto. Journalism is actually an attempt to protect society by belief in informing society, who in turn uphold that we are a nation of laws. This is what Abraham Lincoln taught, which is what made him so important for so long to so many people. It's clear that he isn't very important anymore, and there's a lot of reasons why. But let me just read you something I've said and written again and again over the last 50 years, which they have absolutely smushed out every single time I have done it. The attack was blindside. I was 12 years old. It was like being shot. I had never seen the attackers before. The kidnapping crimes were not only brutally violent, leaving me deaf with severe head injuries, they were demented in ways that are hard to describe. I was prelingual and still learning vocabulary in elementary school. I suffered deeply from ingrained neurotraumatic amnesia. The lightning attacks to the head with sudden, swift, slaughtering blows out of the blue, the deranged looks, masks, speaking to me in tongues when I would grow conscious from chloroform genre pedophile hostage abuse, sometimes being force fed, compulsory and obscenely powerful LSD, left me so demented from fear that I scarcely know what to say. 44 years later, I still bite my fingernails bloody. And this was dismissed routinely, over and over again, as a provincial norm. Okay, I want you to understand that respect has come to mean in this culture the obsequious invisibility that Bertolt Benelheim describes of concentration camps when he said of the prisoners with respect to the guards communicated, do not dare to come to our attention. You may consider it open mic bully behavior, but it's far worse than that. I dared to try to come to somebody's attention. I dared to try to get help. And that was absolutely out of the question. So notice what the organized rabbits deny. Also notice how they have the power to restrict my movements. In other words, for me to be at liberty to even have a modicum of health. My legs were calamitized by the lockdown. I'm getting my stride back, but only very slowly. I have to make some sort of agreement with them. Notice how Lavrov in Russia and Biden work together on framing the talking point. If you want to go around saying that you were tortured in a criminal syndicate like this, then you must be encouraging Russia. They must be your attorney. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Dada kid, who went on to write speeches for Donald Trump, considered the nature of reality a proven theorem. The University of Pittsburgh's high command, Nostrom's underwrote. Nordenberg clearly favored Adam Eisenstadt, even though he was partners with someone who was partners with Schulman writing speeches for Donald Trump. He said, I'm contemptuous of the whole thing, and expressed Nordenberg's view, my father, a senior faculty member, as my father, Ryland, soft-headed, anachronistic father. You know, and it's not necessarily a crime to speak down. You're better, but I did point out that ethics were a much more serious consideration for the University of Pittsburgh when men like my father were in power over chancellors like Nordenberg. So what you see in this is the problems of Donald Trump explained through the nostrums of the University of Pittsburgh community. One of them, Thos Gordon, used to say that the Tsarina's son in Russia was so consumptive that the peasants had nothing but contempt for him. So you see, the nature of reality isn't just that we're a nation of crimes, but we're a nature of brutalizing children. You know, these people's, one of their actions, what they considered poetic justice, poetic fulfillment, was to kick an old black woman in the face at the start of, as a signal for the COVID-19 attack. And not one single stupid MF dared to see beat Cateno's doings for what the points he was driving at were. He put out a scene by the sea, which has a deaf surfer in a Pittsburgh t-shirt. He put out Dolls, which has a woman strangely weeping over the loss of a ball in her pipe toy that spins the ball in the air. He had a film called Brutal Cop, even though his reputation was to be a comedian. He had something called Battle Royal that mapped out a parameter and lured unsuspecting high school students to mayhem of last man alive gets to late. A horrible film. It shows the sadism and lack of scruples that Yoko Ono praises as her great culture. You know, and the saying, still a POW of Hiroshima all these years later. And threatening, you know, you nuke, no north, you know, the nuke, no night. And brother, not one stupid MFer admitted the brother was about Obama, which is when it came out. It was the first Japanese movie made in Los Angeles. And he, after, you know, gangster acts, sort that like Clinton Hill, Clinton Hill, witnessed in Dealey Plaza. You have, you know, this black man ride down the highway with a briefcase full of money that he's been passed by this gangster, you know, and he's, you know, and this is not a statement about Obama. Not one MFer could see that. When you talk about Leslie Katz, one other thing that none of these people who spin the game can get over, it's the way that Frippy Tune played it. Because When you look at Matt Marcus and friends of his like Sarah Becker, who invited me to perform in Girls with Guns, and Peg Simons of Hypatia, all of them saw me as borderline heroic. One of Leslie's closest friends at Swarthmore College came up to me and told me to my face, I really admire you for not forcing yourself on Leslie under the circumstances that she presented herself nude night after night for months. Okay, so none of these people believed or tried to convert her virginity into proof of rape until Penis Gabriel and Robert Fripp got in the game. They knew about the neuroplasm that had been induced. They could see that the singular viciousness that it was subjecting me to was making me frightened. And they used it for a code for Amnesty International switchboard bombings over the AIDS tyranny that they authored, which they called Operation Medicine Man, which continued all through my time in Seattle, where they poisoned me in the mouth and lead up to COVID. And the Ouspensky Circle playing, the media war game in the parameter of the battle royal that's going on in Richard Crane. Did I say Richard Crane? I mean Ukraine. Did I say Uganda? Was it Uganda? Ukraine? Richard Crane? No, Ukraine. Yeah, where Ouspensky was from, the fourth wave people who Flip cohabitates with. Flip. Robert Fripp of King Crimson, the master of ceremonies. Elizabeth Elizabeth Blumenfeld from Highland Park, her little group, sent the letters to me. And my mother had a stillborn twins. Tops were luckier; they got the twins survived. He was the fat man, I was the little boy, and they just tortured. And that's all there was to it, because we're a nation of crimes now, not a nation of loves. You know, and it's like go along and get along. There's nothing else you can do about it, they say. So Pitt ultimately wins the debate by the Fern Hollow Bridge collapse. All is revealed in the nature of reality.